Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of my FPS film photography series. I thought I would perhaps use this as a video to introduce you to the different types of film camera that there are out there. I'm going to start with the most common or the smallest, and that is 35mm. That's sort of, if you were around my age at least, that's the film that most of your parents would have been using to take pictures of you as a kid, and they fit into smaller cameras typically. Here's my favourite 35mm camera that I own. This is a Leica M3. This is a rangefinder camera, which basically means that you're looking through a little window here. That's your viewfinder. There's no mirror system as you would have with an SLR, and which means, once again, when you take the picture, you click it down and you don't get any blackout. You see the image as you hear the click, because you're not looking through the lens. You're looking through a little viewfinder with frame lines. And the cool thing about the rangefinder system is that it has a series of internal mirrors here. So if you look here, this is the entry point for your rangefinder patch. So let me try and explain this. When you look through the viewfinder of a rangefinder, what you see is a clear window with perhaps the frame lines of your photograph for your lens focal length, and you see a little rectangular patch in the middle quite often, and in that little rectangular patch you should see two images, and to focus your camera you've basically got to take the two images in that patch and line them up into one. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's actually the simplest and quickest way to manually focus a camera. Leica have perfected this. They pretty much started this off and have kept it going for a very, very long time. And this camera is one of the nicest I've ever used, and my favourite camera. It's just a really, really quick, easy method of focusing, and allows me to focus more on, what I'm thinking of photographing rather than what I'm doing with the camera. And these little Leicas are really quiet. They're really stealthy. So I do love these rangefinder type cameras. Other types of 35mm camera include what you may be more familiar with if you shoot digitally, which are DSLRs, for example. So what SLR stands for is single lens reflex, and here is an example of a very old Canon SLR, not DSLR, it's an SLR, an old film SLR. And this is basically the same as your DSLRs, except it uses film instead of a digital sensor. And these got really advanced later in time. They became autofocus capable. They have all these extremely advanced metering and focus tracking options. This one is very, very basic. It is an autofocus camera, so you will hear the motor move in the lens when I've switched it on. You can't even hear that, it's so quiet. Let me try. It's very quiet. That's because of the lens. The lens itself has got an ultrasonic motor and it's really quiet. This is your typical very soft click of a rangefinder. That's the photograph gone. The sound is more like this. And the reason for that is you've got three processes going on with this camera. The first is that you have a mirror inside it, which you can see there. Oh, can you see it? Can I get it? Oh, I can't really. You might be able to see there's a mirror there. And basically, you can see that flip up as you take the picture. What that does is, because you're looking through the lens with an SLR camera, so I'm actually looking through a pentaprism, and then I'm looking into a reflected view of what's coming into the lens through a mirror, bouncing up and refracting through a pentaprism into my viewfinder. So when I take the picture, that mirror has to flip up out of the way, allow the light to hit the film at the back behind the shutter, and then when it closes, the mirror flaps back down again. So you get a temporary blackout of the image as you take the picture. Some of the SLRs designed were extremely robust, brilliant cameras, so this wasn't really a problem. However, personal thing, I think I prefer the rangefinder, a very simple window. Yeah, some people say it's not as accurate for framing, but to be honest, it is extremely accurate if you've got a good camera. So I don't see what the fuss is. These cameras are smaller, they're lighter. Not this one, this has got a hefty lens on it, but typically, look at the size difference. I mean, speaks for itself, really. This is a big lens, but still. That sort of covers a few easy 35mm cameras there. You can go down to anything as cheap as this little Vivitar, what was it, a PN 2011. This is a panoramic camera, which basically means it has a mask above and behind the film to give you like a long slit of exposure rather than the entire frame. So you get a sort of fake panorama. I think this cost me £6, so it's got a film in it, so I'm not going to fire it, but yeah, you've got anything from the great Leicas through to these little cheapos and everything in between. Stepping up, this is as large as it goes for me. You have medium format. Now, medium format typically uses medium format uses a different film type called 120 film or roll film, or it could be 220 film sometimes. Now, it's typically 120 film, which basically means you get, depending on the size you're shooting, you can get anything from about 6 frames, or is it 6 frames, or how many is it? It's 9 frames through to 12 frames. So if you have this little beauty here, which is a square format camera, this is a Rolleiflex, manufactured in Germany by a company called Rollei with Zeiss lenses. Brilliant camera. Then you have 12 shots on the roll, and you get a square image back. Medium format is another level when it comes to resolution and image quality. In fact, a good medium format camera will supersede anything that has been created so far in terms of digital photography. This is a small compact Rolleiflex. A much bigger, more professional SLR camera is this, and it weighs an absolute ton. This is a Mamiya RB67. These are really great, enormous, giant, big professional cameras. Back in the day, if you were to have a shoot for a fashion magazine, say Vogue or something like that, you would have a camera that is something like this. If not the actual Mamiya itself, it would have been its competitor, which is the Hasselblad Swiss-made cameras, beautiful cameras. But later, I believe these became even more popular in magazine formats because you had a wider frame size than you would with a typical square Hasselblad. Square format Hasselblad. This is called the RB67 because it takes a 6x7 image, so the image is a bit wider, it's not a typical square. And RB stands for revolving back. So if you were to take a landscape image, you don't have to do that to make it portrait. You can just rotate the back. There you go. And then it turns the film portrait, which is awesome. These are SLR cameras. The lenses on this camera, the lenses available for this camera are absolutely phenomenal. They would give modern day lenses a run for their money any day. These are really quite phenomenal pieces of engineering here. And this particular one has the finder on the top is a waist level finder, which means you put it down and you look through the top. I'm not sure if you can see what's inside there. If I put my hand over, can you see? It's a bit tricky to get it through. Oh, there we go. You can see it's got a frosted or ground glass screen, and you can see the image on that. And you focus by moving the lens back and forward with the little knob here, which pushes some bellows out. And yeah, that's the waist level finder option. There are all these different finders that you can get for the RB67. This is a quick intro anyway. And that's a medium format camera. The images I've gotten out of this camera have been some of the best in terms of resolution that I've ever taken or ever seen. It is quite phenomenal. The film, the negative is about that tall and that wide compared to 35mm, which is about that tall and that wide. So you have a lot more film making up your image and therefore a lot more scope for resolution and for showing off good lenses, for example. And to give you an idea, I had a partial frame I took with this and I managed to scan it to 52 megapixels, which is ridiculous, and it was still sharp. That was using a colour film, Kodak Portra. So yeah, I thought I'd mention that. That's one example. This is probably the best. This Mamiya camera here is the best camera I own in terms of resolution and just pure image making power. It is incredible. But as you can see, the size of it, this weighs a lot. You can't see that obviously in the image, but I would say it weighs probably about 1 to 1.5 kilos, something like that. It's a hefty piece of gear. So it's not exactly something you'd sling around your neck for taking holiday snaps. So bearing that in mind, it's not the most ideal or easily transported camera, but if image quality is at the top of your priorities, then you cannot beat a solid medium format SLR like that. Or the little Rolleiflex, in fact. This little Rolleiflex here takes phenomenal little images. It's much, much smaller, it's more compact. Square format, as I mentioned before, but the Zeiss lenses on this are absolutely phenomenal. They resolve extremely sharply, beautiful bokeh or out of focus areas in the image as well. Really, really pretty. And very, very quiet. Listen to this. You can barely hear that shutter. It's got a little handle. Listen again. It's virtually silent. So these are really quite pioneering pieces of design here. Like the Mamiya, it's got a waist level finder. You look down. However, Rollei took it a few steps further. You also have a little pop-up magnifier, which the Mamiya also has, to make it easier to look down. Or if you want to shoot like this, you can just flip this down. And you've got a square little hole for framing. And then down here, you've got a little lens to check a piece of the image for focusing, which is really, really smart. So you can focus with this and frame with this. And this makes it easier to follow things with your eye rather than looking down all the time. You get a different perspective, which is really cool. Oh, mine keeps flipping up, but I'll fix that at some point. So yeah, that covers medium format. The last type of sort of film format that you have is large format. Now, I don't own any large format cameras. I would love to at some point in the future, but I don't have the facilities to scan that film or to enlarge it for that matter. But large format is still the highest, the most powerful resolving format in all of photography. All digital just doesn't come close. So bear that in mind. You get anything from 4x5 film formats, or typical formats. 4x5, the negative is about this big, and you get 8x10 huge cameras, which is about this big. So as long as you have a lens to match up to that, you have some serious photo taking power right there. It's just phenomenal. So I'd love to try large format one day, and if you want to give it a go, then please do. You will have to develop the photographs as individual frames, but the resulting negative is this big. So when you make a print or a scan, the resolution is simply phenomenal if you have a good lens on there. So I hope that helps a little bit. That gives a little overview of the different types of camera. There are actually many more formats. There's 110 cameras. There are Polaroid cameras, of course, and everything. There's a couple other formats out there, but those are your most typical standard formats in photography, or film photography in particular. So yeah, I hope that was useful, and see you in the next FPS series video. Peace out.